Okay, so as John said at the beginning, today we start our series on Micah. So this is a 5-week series that we are following, but we're not alone because this is a series that's been put together by the Methodist Church so that lots and lots of churches are studying it, not necessarily at the same time as us, but have been studying it before or after. And just to say that this means that these 5 weeks, the services will be focused on one particular passage from Micah till we've covered the whole thing. But alongside that, there are also home groups which are studying the same passage. So that if you don't belong to a home group, this is a really good opportunity because you only have to go for 5 weeks at the most. So if you go along and you're too polite, only, sort of think, I don't really like this, but I'll just have to keep going for the 5, that's very polite. But at the end of that, you can just say, not for me, thank you very much. On the other hand, you might say, oh, well, this is what I've been missing. Let me sign up for 3 different house groups because I love them so much. So if you are interested in joining a house group, speak to me or to John Starling after the service and we'll tell you the number of different house groups and find out which one would suit you best. So the study of Micah is both on Sundays and also during the week. Can I also just give a little bit of warning? Micah has 2 messages, really. Has a message of judgment, quite negative, quite stunning, really, in some ways. Also has a message of hope. However, this morning, we only get as far as the judgment. So if you want hope, you've got to come back next week. So if you only come to this week, then you're going to get quite a one-sided view of Micah. This isn't where it stops, but this is the passage that we've been given today. So let's just start by thinking for a moment or two who Micah is. You might know that Micah is an Old Testament prophet, but what does that mean? Where was he? Where did he live? What sort of person was he? What time did he live? So a very brief timeline up here, just so we can give a sort of context in terms of time as to when Micah was. Many, many, many years ago, Moses lived, 1300 BC. This means this is the time when God's people were in Egypt, where they were so badly treated. Under God, Moses took them out of there and they wandered around the desert for 40 years and then went into the promised land. Round about 1000 BC, we can say that kingdom that they went to establish under God was fully established. Just before 1000 BC, David set up Jerusalem as his capital, and just after 1000, Solomon builds the temple. So Jerusalem is very much a political and economic and a spiritual capital. So they are established as one kingdom, but not for very long. By 930 BC, so only 70 years later, that strong kingdom under God has separated into 2. And has become 2 different kingdoms. If I put a map up for you, we're only interested for today in the dark blue and the light blue countries here, because these are the 2 countries that they split into. So in the north, this is the bigger country called Israel. They have Samaria as their capital, and that's one kingdom. And then in the south, we have Judah, where Jerusalem is their capital. They are much smaller and much weaker than their neighbours Israel. So that was the one kingdom, and it's now split into 2 because they squabbled over who was going to be king and what taxes were going to be paid, and those sorts of things. Just to look a little bit ahead, from 930 for about 200 years, basically the people who lived in Israel and the people who lived in Judah, for most of that time, not quite all of that time, were moving away from what God wanted them to do. In Israel, it was a sort of, it was a graph that sort of got further and further away from God. In Judah's case, it was more, sometimes they had a good king who led them in the direction of God, and then the next one was a bad king who led them away, and then the next one led them. So it was a sort of alternating situation. such that in 723, I think it's 723, 721 possibly, the kingdom in the north, Israel, is taken over by the Assyrian Empire. So on this map you can see the green bit is Assyria. It's absolutely vast, really mighty, really powerful, and they come and they take over Israel. They nearly take Judah. They get to the sort of outskirts of Jerusalem, and then this an extraordinary situation arose when Isaiah was the prophet, and they went back again. But we haven't got time to look at that today, but it is a fantastic story. So if you could just see on that map the brown little bit, that is Israel and Judah. So you can see that actually they're very small, and Assyria is this big, mighty army. In these 200 years or more, when God's people are acting and behaving and being led away from God, at the same time we have prophets coming up and speaking the word of God. So that in the northern kingdom of Israel, we have Hosea and Amos, who are speaking very clearly about what God's people should be doing and how they need to change their ways. And in the southern kingdom, we have the great prophet of Isaiah, and we have Micah. So that's where Micah is. He's in the smaller kingdom. While he's prophesying, this great empire of Assyria takes hold and takes over the northern kingdom. But he is speaking out at roughly the same time as Isaiah and telling people where to live, how to live, and how they need to be moving back towards God and not away from God. So then, we're going to turn to a section of Micah. We're going to start at the very beginning with Micah chapter 1, and let's come to the lectern, please. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear a small passage, and then I'm going to just talk about it just for a short bit and then hear the next bit. If you have been fortunate enough, as you came through the door, to be given one of these pieces of paper, then you will have the reading in front of you as well. The very fortunate few have also got a map in colour. The unfortunate of you will have it in black and white, but it still shows the same thing. So, reading then from Micah chapter 1 and verse 1.
The word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth during the reigns of Jotham, Ahaz and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, the vision he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem.
Okay, if we could just put up the last of my maps, please, which is also the map that you have got on the back of your piece of paper. So we read there, or we had read for us, the word of the Lord that came to Micah of Moresheth. Now on your map, you can see, it's not so easy to see on this one here, Moresheth Gath is on the left-hand side. It's just in Judah. Sort of, it says Gath in big words, big letters, and then underneath that. One found where that is. So that's where Micah lived. That's where he came from. So he's fairly close to Jerusalem. He's not a million miles away from Jerusalem. He's definitely in Judah, but on the borders, and maybe that it gives a sort of context to what he's saying. But the thing to note about him is that he's living in an area of agriculture. This is a small town. It's probably more than a village, but not much more than a small town, where the land and farming is absolutely central. And as we're going to see, much of what he says is against the cities rather than against people in the countryside. So we've got Micah set both in terms of the time that he lived and where he's living. Let's hear some of the things that he says.
Hear, you peoples, all of you. Listen, earth and all who live in it, that the sovereign Lord may bear witness against you, the Lord, from his holy temple. Look, the Lord is coming from his dwelling place. He comes down and treads on the heights of the earth. The mountains melt beneath him, and the valleys split apart, like wax before the fire, like water rushing down a slope.
I wonder, when we sang "How Great is Our God," do we have in our mind's eye what that actually might look like. We don't perhaps often picture God. God is sort of spirit and different and other. But if we were to try and turn that into a picture, I wonder what that picture might be. This is what Micah tells us. The Lord is coming from his dwelling place. He comes down and treads on the heights of the earth. The mountains melt beneath him. The valleys split apart, like wax before the fire, like water rushing down a slope. This sort of enormous being. And if you picture, I don't know what the biggest mountain is that you've ever seen, the idea that God is going to tread on that and the mountains are going to melt away. So Micah is saying to the people, this is your God. This is your great God. But the words that came before that, I think, are chilling words. Verse 2, he says, hear, you peoples, listen, earth. So hear and listen, that the sovereign Lord may bear witness against you. The sovereign Lord may bear witness against you. This great God who created you, created the mountains that are so small that he can just stand on them, as it were, who led you out of Egypt and took you into the promised land and gave you this great kingdom, that sovereign Lord may bear witness against you because of the way that you're living.
All this is because of Jacob's transgression, because of the sins of the people of Israel. What is Jacob's transgression? Is it not Samaria? What is Judah's high place? Is it not Jerusalem? Therefore I will make Samaria a heap of rubble, a place for planting vineyards. I will pour her stones into the valley and lay bare her foundations. All her idols will be broken to pieces. All her temple gifts will be burned with fire. I will destroy all her images. Since she gathered her gifts from the wages of prostitutes, as the wages of prostitutes, they will again be used.
Okay, so here comes the judgment. Here's the Lord God bearing witness against, well, against who? Verse 5, what is Jacob? Jacob is really another word for Israel, so he was talking about the northern kingdom. What is Jacob's transgression? Is it not Samaria? Samaria is the capital of Israel. What is Judah's high place? Is it not Jerusalem? In other words, what he seems to be gunning for is the capital cities. Now, he's a country person, and I think that country people are often suspicious of big cities. You know, they think that's where evil happens, that's where bad things go on. People are different, think differently, act differently from people in the country. And I do sometimes think that, if you think of our country today, people who live a long way, maybe, I don't know, Derbyshire Dales or something like that, and look towards London, you know, and I sort of think they have a very different image, I suspect, of London compared to the people who actually live in London. But why is he going for the capital cities? I think what he's doing here is to say that where power is, that's where it's gone wrong. It's the leaders that have done the wrong things, their wrong thinking, their wrong laws, their wrong mode of behaviour, which has become a model and a pattern. And that is where the judgment needs to start. Now, obviously, people can choose whether to follow or not, but it's not always easy not to do, particularly then what the leaders were saying. So where is he looking? Where is the transgression? It's in Samaria, capital city of the northern kingdom, and in Jerusalem, capital city of the southern kingdom. And as a result, it's going to be demolished. Therefore, I will make Samaria a heap of rubble. It will all be destroyed. This is what will happen because the sovereign Lord will bear witness against them. The people of Samaria, the people of Jerusalem could say, but we've done this, we've done this. And what Micah is saying is, how has that measured up to what was put in the covenant relationship between you and between God? Okay, the next bit that we're going to hear, this is taxing reading, so I am very grateful that you have taken this on. What we're going to hear here is a number of different places are mentioned. Now, what these are largely small towns, a bit like the place where Micah was actually living. And what Micah is doing is saying that the means of God's judgment, in other words, the conqueror, the empire that's going to come and destroy, will go along all these different towns and sort of pick them off one by one. So it could be that you want to follow this as we hear it read to us, or you might just like to turn over your page to the map that's here, and you can hear a large number of these places just very near where Micah is living, that are being mentioned, and hear what's going to happen to them.
Because of this, I will weep and wail. I will go about barefoot and naked. I will howl like a jackal and moan like an owl. For Samaria's plague is incurable. It has spread to Judah. It has reached the very gate of my people, even to Jerusalem itself. Tell it not in Gath, weep not at all. In Beth Ophrah, roll in the dust. Pass by naked and in shame, you who live in Shaphir. Those who live in Zarnan will not come out. Beth Ezel is in mourning. It no longer protects you. Those who live in Maroth writhe in pain, waiting for relief, because disaster has come from the Lord, even to the gate of Jerusalem. You who live in Lachish harness fast horses to the chariot. You are where the sin of daughter Zion began, for the transgressions of Israel were found in you. Therefore, you will give parting gifts to Moresheth Gath. The town of Akzib will prove deceptive to the kings of Israel. I will bring a conqueror against you who live in Mareshah.
Okay, so town by town, this conqueror is going to take over. I mean, sometimes we listen to things that are going on in Ukraine, don't we? And we hear about this town and this town. And, you know, at the beginning, we were horrified, and we're still horrified, but they've just begun to become names of towns, perhaps. For Micah, these are his neighbouring towns. So he's saying, because of the way in which you have behaved, because you have turned away from God, this conqueror is going to come, and writes these names down. And this morning we were thinking about the fact that, you know, if these were towns that we knew, I think it would bring it home in a very chilling way. You know, if we heard that Reigate will be taken, and then moving on to Crawley, and then finally at the gates of East Grinstead, that's where the conqueror is coming. What Micah is doing here is something, it's a really, really clever piece of writing, because we can't see it unless we happen to know the language, but he's playing on the words of each of these towns. So what he says is going to happen to the town is a play on either the word or the meaning of the words. One commentator has done the same thing for Scotland. So it's where this commentator lives, just to give an idea of how Micah is working. So he says this: Creef will know grief, Forfar will forfeit, Crail will be frail, Wick will be burned, Stornoway will be blown away, Edinburgh will be no Eden, and for Tain there will only be pain. So when it's towns that we know and we understand the language, we can see that link, can't we? And this is what Micah is doing, exactly the same thing. He's taking the name of the town and he's either making a sort of rhyme from it, or he's taking the meaning of it and then pushing the message through like that. But this chilling thing, this conqueror is going to come. And just have that picture, that map, that Assyrian empire getting closer and closer and closer.
The nobles of Israel will flee to Adullam. Shave your head in mourning for the children in whom you delight. Make yourself as bald as the vulture, for they will go from you into exile.
Okay, so this is what's going to happen. In will come the conqueror, and out will go at least the leaders and probably more people than that. When it says, shave your head in mourning for the children in whom you delight, it is true that he's talking a bit about families being separated, but mostly children. By children, what he's talking about is the leaders. So he's saying, in will come the Assyrian Empire and take away the leaders, the people who made the decisions, and then your country will not know what to do. It's left, as it were, with nowhere to go. And indeed, in 723, when Assyria came in and took over Israel, Israel disappears, just vanishes. The leaders are gone, its lands are taken over by Assyria, and it is gone. And Micah watches that happen. While he's speaking these words, he sees this judgment and this punishment actually happening.
Woe to those who plan iniquity, to those who plot evil on their beds. At morning's light they carry it out, because it is in their power to do it. They covet fields and seize them, and houses and take them. They defraud people of their homes. They rob them of their inheritance.
So up until now, everything's been a bit vague. Evil, wrongdoing, it's all been a bit general. Here, it starts to become specific. So here he talks about people who plot evil on their beds. In other words, the day is over, they go to bed and they think, what can I do that will make life difficult for somebody else? Has somebody else got something that I want? How can I bring it about so that I can have it? Verse 2, they covet fields and seize them, and houses and they take them. For somebody to lose their field that they owned meant that they lost, in the geographical situation where he was, lost their economic means of survival. If they haven't got their land, no longer can they grow things to sell or for themselves. So if their land or their house is taken, then they will either have to become a servant or quite likely become a slave. And why do these people take them? They take them because they want them. They don't need them. They've got their own land. They've got their own houses. They see something. They want it. They go to bed to plot how to get it. And then first thing in the morning, they're up, off, and they go and take it. A little bit more specific here. I was wondering, when I was thinking about this, whether I doubt that we go to bed and plot how to make life difficult for people. I doubt we go to bed and plot how to get things or take things that aren't ours. But I wonder if we sometimes need to flip that on its head, because I think there is some evidence that the structures of our society are set up such that there is an inbuilt inequality in a large number of different ways. So that the plotting that we have to do, although it's a bit of a negative word, is how to work so that we overturn that. And that might be in something simple, like when we go shopping for coffee. Which coffee are we going to buy? Are we going to buy the sort that we know people are paid a fairer wage and they're looked after, or are we going to buy simply what we like and not think about where it's come from or who's produced it? Or if we go shopping for clothes, we all now, in particular, need to be thinking about how much things cost and so forth. But is that at the cost of people making our clothes in conditions that we would never, ever want to work in, or for an amount of money that we would consider absolutely ridiculous? Or do we say, I'm not going to buy that, and I will wait, and I won't have that new piece, and I'll wait, and then buy something when we know, or have a little bit more confidence anyway, that people are working in better conditions. So maybe for us, we need to turn this on its head. What positive decisions will we make in what we purchase, or indeed in how we spend our time? Will we get involved in campaigns? This Walking with Micah is not just looking at what Micah says, important though that is. Alongside it, there is a whole programme of events and ways of helping us to think out what we can do to bring about a fairer world and to consider issues of social justice. So will we make not a positive decision not to plot to get things, but a positive decision to do something that will maybe change somebody's life, maybe change our community, and maybe beyond that?
Therefore, the Lord says, I am planning disaster against this people, from which you cannot save yourselves. You will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity. In that day, people will ridicule you. They will taunt you with this mournful song. We are utterly ruined. My people's possession is divided up. He takes it from me. He assigns our fields to traitors. Therefore, you will have no one in the assembly of the Lord to divide the land by lot.
So this is the consequence of listening and hearing, that the sovereign Lord may bear witness against you. Samaria will become rubble, and here I am planning disaster against this people from which you cannot save yourselves. And for us today, this is where we have to leave the message of Micah. Next week we will pick up that actually, even though the people couldn't save themselves, God has got a plan and there is hope to come. And indeed, in our communion part of the service, we will pick up some of those ideas of mercy and justice today. But for God's people, these are not foreigners from God. These are God's people whom he loves. He leaves us with these words: I am planning disaster against this people from which you cannot save yourselves.